He stood up, straightened his tie, and declared, "We're leaving. Forever." I'll never forget how the room instantly fell silent. My son, only 9 years old, dressed sharp in a navy blue suit he insisted on wearing, stood tall, placing both hands firmly on the table, and said with unwavering clarity, "Clear as day, we're leaving for good." His gaze locked directly onto my mother. Around us, remnants of birthday cake lingered on plates. Candles had just been blown out. My sister held her phone halfway through filming the moment, and my brother was still caught mid-laugh from a joke seconds before. But Micah's words cut through it all like a cold gust in a stifling room. The strangest part? I didn't stop him. If someone had told me a year ago that my son would be the one to stand up to the most controlling, manipulative person in our lives, his own grandmother, I would have laughed or cried, probably both, because I never believed either of us had that strength. I was raised to be quiet, polite, to endure discomfort with a tight smile and a folded napkin resting on my lap. That's what my mother taught me. Appearances over feelings, peace at any cost, even if it kills you inside. But Micah hadn't received that lesson. That morning he came into my room clutching his church clothes, his dress shoes dusty from his last wear at his dad's custody hearing, and his blazer still had the tag hanging from the inside pocket. Calm and collected, he looked up and asked, "Mom, do you think I can dress up for Grandma's birthday?" I hesitated but said, "If you want, baby. You don't have to impress anyone." He paused and said, "I know. I just want to say something." At the time, I thought he wanted to make a toast or tell Grandma how much he loved her. That's the kind of sensitive, soft-spoken, observant child he is, always noticing when I'm hurting, bringing me tea, or drawing pictures on my bad days. But now I see he wasn't dressing to impress. He was dressing to be taken seriously. When we arrived at the party, a small gathering at my mother's house, as always, I felt the tension tighten instantly. It was the same as every year. Forced smiles, over-the-top decorations, cold remarks disguised as polite sarcasm. Vera, my mother, glanced at Micah up and down and said, "Why'd you dress him up like that? Nobody cares how he looks." Micah didn't respond. He sat quietly, hands folded, waiting. I should have defended him, but old habits die hard. I smiled tight and fake, saying he just wanted to look nice, and let it go like I always do. But Micah didn't. For the next hour, he sat at the table, listening to every sharp dig my mother threw at me about my job, my parenting, my softness, how she would have raised Micah differently, how I was lucky to have family putting up with my mess. She always says things just sharp enough to draw blood, but sweet enough that no one calls her out. That's how she's always been, and I always let it slide. I told myself, that's just how she is. Family is complicated. But Micah doesn't have the years of excuses I built up, the emotional calluses. He only has a clear sense of right and wrong. That night, right after the cake was cut and the noise began rising again, he looked at me with those quiet, steady eyes and whispered, "Can I say something?" I nodded, clueless what was coming. Then he stood and spoke. His words, the ones he had dressed up to say, "We're leaving for good." I knew then he was doing it for both of us, not just protecting himself, but protecting me. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt safe. Before the party, everything was already unraveling. People think birthdays are joyful, family, gathered around cake and candles, old stories shared over wine, laughter echoing through the house. That's the picture everyone paints. But for me, birthdays, especially my mother's, always felt like stepping into a pressure cooker, with no escape. My name is Alara. I'm 33, a single mom living with Micah in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It's not much, but it's ours. A quiet, warm sanctuary, nothing like the house I grew up in. Micah is 9, thoughtful and quiet in public, chatty at home. The kind of kid who apologizes if he accidentally steps on a bug and holds my hand in the grocery store without being asked. He's sharp, noticing everything more than I realized. The week before the party, he asked me if we really had to go. "Can we just send a card?" he said, stirring his cereal. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I wished we could. "You know how Grandma is," I said. "She expects everyone to show up." What I didn't say was that I was already dreading it. Every year, the same painful script plays out. We arrive. She compliments everyone else but critiques my weight. My clothes, my parenting, makes subtle digs in front of others designed to embarrass but impossible to call out. If I speak, I'm too sensitive. If I stay silent, I feel small. That's always been her. Passive-aggressive, wrapped in pearls. Vera, my mother, demands perfection from everyone but grants herself every flaw. Growing up, she kept our house, spotless and our smiles camera-ready, but inside those walls, love felt like something you had to earn. Got an A? She'd ask why it wasn't an A+. Cleaned your room? She'd run her finger over the baseboards. When I cried, she said, "You think you have it bad? You don't know what bad looks like." I didn't know then that what I lived through was emotional abuse. I just thought I was a disappointing daughter. When I got pregnant at 23, her disappointment reached a new depth. Micah's father left before he even saw the ultrasound. I remember telling her. She stood silent, then sighed and said, "Well, I guess you've really done it now." She promised to help, but her help came with strings, advice disguised as criticism, babysitting offered with conditions, emotional debt masked as generosity. For years, I swallowed it all, telling myself Micah needed a grandmother, that I shouldn't burn bridges just because I was hurt. I tolerated the cold comments, swallowed the shame, and kept the peace. But something inside me had been shifting. Not her, she never changes, but me. A slow, aching exhaustion had settled deep in my bones, the kind that builds when you spend your whole life tiptoeing around someone who can wound you with a single look. I started to see myself through Micah's eyes, and I hated what I saw. A mother who stayed silent while being mistreated. A woman who wore a smile like armor, masking her pain just to keep everyone else comfortable. And Micah. He was beginning to notice too. There was this moment, just a week before the party, when he found me quietly crying in the kitchen. I didn't even realize he was awake until he walked in, looked at me with those calm eyes and said, "You don't have to go if you don't want to, Mom." I knelt down and held him so tightly I thought I might crush him, but I didn't tell him then what was stirring inside me, that something had shifted. That night, a question took root in my mind. Why did I keep placing myself in front of someone who never truly saw me? Why was I teaching my son that this cold, painful silence, was love? When the invitation finally arrived, just a cold text with no warmth, no emojis, I knew we would go. I wasn't ready to sever ties, not yet. But Micah, he was already miles ahead of me, preparing to say what I couldn't. This birthday party wouldn't be like the others. Why dress up? Nobody cares how you look. We pulled into my mother's driveway 10 minutes late. I'd spent the whole car ride coaching myself to breathe slowly, to keep my voice steady, practicing smiles in the rearview mirror. Old habits. My hand trembled when I turned off the ignition, but Micah sat poised beside me, suit jacket buttoned. Tight, hair brushed thrice that morning, shoes polished, ready for something important. I squeezed his hand and whispered, "You ready?" He nodded, expression serious, no smile. The moment we stepped inside, the familiar weight of Vera's house crushed down on me. Perfect hardwood floors shining, china meticulously arranged. Soft Bach music filling the air, never Mozart because Vera always had opinions. From the kitchen doorway came her voice, sweet and sharp. "Look who finally decided to show up." Her tone sounded pleasant to others, but I knew the poison. Beneath. Her eyes scanned Micah, taking in his blazer, polished shoes, the tie he'd fussed over, and she scoffed. Why dress up? Nobody cares how you look, laughing as if it were a joke. Micah's face didn't change, but I felt his fingers clench mine, and I stood frozen. I should have defended him, snapped back with, I care how he looks, or don't speak to him that way. But instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and smiled tightly. He just wanted to dress up. This was what I'd done my whole life around her. Minimize, diminish, pretend it didn't hurt. The party dragged on in slow motion. My brother Jonah arrived late, greeted with applause. My sister Lenora showed up with some expensive wine, and Vera fussed theatrically about how only Lenora understood her taste. She called Micah Michael twice without bothering to correct herself. He said nothing, but his eyes watched and absorbed every slight, every undercutting word. Vera was in rare form that night. When we were all gathered in the living room, she leaned over and murmured just loud enough for me to hear. You could at least wear something flattering. It's a party, not a PTA meeting. Her words weren't loud, but they hit like 1,000. Tiny cuts. I looked down at my plain blouse, the one I'd worn to countless job interviews, and felt small and powerless, embarrassed for even trying. That was my mother's way. Her cruelty subtle, disguised as care, her voice a knife-coated. In honey? I slipped into the kitchen for water, caught my reflection in the microwave's dark glass. Cheeks flushed, eyes heavy, feeling like a balloon slowly losing air. When I returned, Micah sat stiffly at the dining table, hands folded, backpack, tucked neatly beneath his chair, staring not at the cake, but through it. I sat beside him, whispered, Are you okay? His eyes met mine, steady and calm. Can I say something later? After the cake, I answered, hesitant. You'll see, he said quietly, voice steady, not angry or scared. In that moment, chills ran down my spine. Micah wasn't upset or throwing a tantrum. He was planning something. This was no cry for attention. He had been holding something inside for so long, and tonight, dressed up not to be cute but to be taken seriously, he was ready to speak his truth. I nodded and he stood, pushing back his chair with a soft scrape on the hardwood. The room fell, quiet, eyes turning toward him in confusion. He didn't shout or raise his voice. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his backpack, straightened his tie one last time, cleared his throat, and said, I dressed up today because I wanted to be taken seriously. The room fell utterly silent as Vera cocked her head, a smile, frozen on her face but her eyes narrowing with something sharp beneath. Micah's voice was quiet but clear, cutting through the tension like a knife. I wanted to look nice because I have something important to say. Grandma, you're not kind. To my mom. He paused, locking eyes with Vera. You make her feel small. You say cruel things and laugh like it's a joke, but it's not. It breaks her. She cries when she thinks I don't see. I couldn't breathe. I was rooted in place, watching my son do what I never had the strength to do. Stand up in that house, in front of everyone, and call it out. And I don't want to come here anymore, he said, his voice tight with pain. Because it hurts her. And if you can't be kind to my mom, then we don't want to be here. The silence that followed was deafening. Vera's mouth opened, maybe to dismiss him like always. But before she could, Micah looked at me and said, We're leaving, right, Mom? For the first time, I found my own voice, steady and loud enough for all to hear. Yes, we are. No yelling, no dramatics, no slammed doors, just me picking up my purse, taking Micah's hand, and walking toward the front door. For the first time in my life, I wasn't a scared little girl trapped in that house. I was a mother, a woman, whole. Micah had spoken truth, and in doing so, he gave me back my voice. We were leaving. For good. You could hear a fork drop in that thick silence. Vera's frozen smile faded slowly, blinking like she'd just been struck but refusing to show the sting. That was her. Never crying, never shouting, just sharpening herself like a blade. Even she didn't know how to answer this. My sister stopped recording mid-shot, her phone dropping quietly in her lap. Jonah, mid-bite of cake, suddenly looked like he regretted being there. And I, after years of waiting for permission to walk away, felt something new settle inside me. Not anger, not sorrow, but crystal clear clarity. Micah's small hand slipped into mine, his warmth steady, unwavering. He didn't glance back at them. He only looked up at me. "Are we ready?" he asked, and I nodded. There was no rush, no drama, just two people, a mother and her son, stepping out of a house that had never truly been a home. But just before we reached the door, Vera's voice echoed behind us, cold and calculating, like a claw trying to drag me back into her control. "Don't do this," she warned, her tone sharp and unapologetic. "You're going to regret raising him soft." Then louder, "Now the world won't care about his feelings." I turned slowly, calm but fierce. "I'm not raising him to be soft," I said. "I'm raising him to be kind, to be brave, to be better than what I endured." The smile vanished from her face entirely. She wasn't shocked that Micah stood up to her. She was shocked that I let him. For years, she had molded me into someone small and silent. She never expected resistance, from him or from me. The cold air hit us like freedom as we stepped outside. The muffled party sounds behind the door now meaningless. Micah looked up at me once we reached the car. "Did I mess everything up?" he asked quietly. I knelt beside him, my heart breaking that he even had to ask. "No," I said. "You didn't mess anything up. You told the truth. That's brave. That's everything." He nodded slowly, the weight lifting from his shoulders. Maybe he didn't grasp every detail of what had happened, but he understood enough. That love shouldn't feel like walking on eggshells. That respect is a given, not something you have to fight for. And that sometimes protecting your peace means walking away from people who refuse to change. As we drove home, he stared peacefully out the window. No tension, no fear, just quiet pride. I was shaking too, but not from fear. It was adrenaline, relief, and a fierce pride I hadn't felt in years, not just for Micah, but for myself. I didn't make excuses this time. I didn't shrink away or pretend her cruelty didn't hurt. I let my son speak the truth, and I stood with him. That day wasn't just a birthday party. It was the end of a 33-year story of silence and shame. It was the moment we stopped playing the roles Vera wrote for us. Micah wasn't just a boy in a suit. He was a mirror showing me who I was and who I could become if I finally stopped apologizing for needing love that doesn't wound. When we got home that evening, he kicked off his shoes, threw his blazer on the couch, and said with a grin, "I'm starving. Do we have mac and cheese?" I laughed. A real, honest laugh. We made dinner just the two of us. No candles, no forced smiles, just warmth, safety, and freedom. For the first time in my life, I felt whole, like nothing was missing. We hadn't just left a party. We'd broken a cycle. Later, wrapped in a blanket, the TV humming softly, I sat alone thinking about what we'd done. It wasn't just a dramatic moment or a boy making a bold speech. We'd walked away from a pattern that had haunted generations, silence, shame, and the lie that love means tolerating harm. I expected guilt to come, the kind fed to you as loyalty disguised as pain. But instead, I felt peace. Like stepping off a treadmill I never realized I was on. There was stillness in my chest where dread used to live. I thought about all the times I'd been diminished in that house, the tears in bathroom stalls, the mirror staring trying to fix something that wasn't broken, the lies I believed about my worth and voice. I thought about Micah, how steady and brave he was, how he saw me at my lowest and didn't fall silent, but spoke up. That day was his way of saying, "You matter, you deserve better, and I won't be quiet about it." I realized that even though I was his parent, he had protected me in a way I never had. That kind of strength in a child doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from watching, from caring deeply, from growing up in a home where the truth trembles but is finally spoken. He didn't just speak for me. He showed me who he was becoming, and who I still could be. The next morning, I sent a message to the family group chat. "Micah and I won't be attending future gatherings. Please respect our decision. This is not up for discussion." Vera said nothing. Lenora sent a thumbs-up emoji. Jonah texted, "Understood." That was it, and somehow, it was enough. 2 weeks later, I started therapy, walking in not to explain or justify, but simply to heal, to grow, and to make peace. Micah and I built new traditions, feeding ducks at the lake instead of gathering at Vera's for Thanksgiving, lounging in pajamas, watching every version of The Grinch on Christmas, and on Mother's Day, he brought me breakfast in bed, cereal and toast cut into a heart shape. "I like our family now," he said. "It's quiet." "Me too," I replied. It hasn't been easy. Some nights I still question myself, wonder if I overreacted or if keeping the peace might have been easier. But then I think of Micah's eyes on that day, so clear, so certain, and I remember that peace isn't the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of safety. And at last, we have that. We didn't just leave a party, we left a narrative that told us love means enduring pain. We stepped away from guilt, passed down like a bitter family recipe, making space for something new, a family built on trust, listening, and mutual protection. Micah taught me something I wish I'd known all along. Sometimes the bravest act isn't confrontation, but walking away. Sometimes the one who saves you isn't older or stronger, but a small boy in a suit 2 sizes too big, standing tall and telling the truth when it matters most. We closed that door behind us, and this time we never looked back. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to love you but didn't know how, know this: you are not weak for setting boundaries. You are not broken for wanting better. You are not alone. Breaking a cycle is one of the hardest things in the world, but you can do it. And when you do, you give those who come after you, your children, your nieces and nephews, or even strangers, watching, permission to do the same. If this touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs it, and let me know if you've ever had to make a difficult choice like this. I read every comment. For more real stories, raw and unfiltered, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's next. Above all, take care of yourself. You deserve that much and more.